The entrepreneurial mindset is a problem-solving approach which begins with curiosity about our changing world, connecting innovation with various resources to gain insights and identifying unexpected ways and new ways to add value. And when it comes to the world of engineering, there seems to be an increased appetite to adopt such a mindset moving forward as engineers of the future begin to craft their next path forward to be active and meaningful contributors to progress. According to my friends at South Dakota State University, over 70% of today's engineering students express an interest in learning more about entrepreneurship and how it can open up and further their career options. This is certainly good news for my friend Darren Flynn to hear. He is the managing director of Vinculum Advisory, where they believe that true engineering excellence is more than technical expertise. It's about creating relationships and lasting impact. They're anchored in integrity and driven by desire to deliver measurable value. They specialize in value engineering and delivery management services, which help their clients achieve more with less and optimizing outcomes while reducing costs. They say that too many developments stall on approvals, servicing, and infrastructure, and Vinculum Advisory was founded to change just that. For Flynn, personally, he's on a mission to help engineers become more entrepreneurial. He's passionate about design, thinking about the futures of both innovation, AI, tech, and challenging the status quo. And Flynn joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, my friend, and I'm super excited to learn about your experience in both engineering and business. Great to see you, and happy Tuesday to you, my friend.
Yeah. Well, it's Wednesday here in Sydney at the moment. We're actually we're in front of you, so happy Wednesday. It's Hump Day, as we call it here in Australia. I don't know what you guys call it over there, but here it's Hump Day.
Well, it's the exact same over here, my friend. And, since you're in the middle of the week, we're one day closer to Friday, right?
That's exactly right.
Well, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. But, my friend, I wanted to start our conversation by asking you about the mission that you're on, because I know that you're on a mission to help engineers become more entrepreneurial, because you believe that engineering is much more than the technical aspect of it. You believe that it's all about forming relationships, my friend. So tell me about the mission that you're on and how it's going, my friend.
Yeah, so I spent the years of my young engineering career, in the trenches, learning about concrete and pipes and pumps and, really the technical engineering, mathematics and science parts of engineering. But then it wasn't until I learned that if I could apply the knowledge that I had and actually sell my ideas, that value could save, a client or a developer or a government millions and millions of dollars. And I found that telling better stories and being able to explain the solutions and explain the technical aspects of engineering, it gave me the leverage to accelerate my career in ways that I could never have found if I just, without being over the top, explaining and telling people about, why these things were and how things worked. And I think a lot of people at the moment, engineering is just a bit of a myth. There's a stereotype that engineers are nerdy or geeks. There's a stereotype that they just sit in the back of a room and crunch numbers on their calculators. But what I'm trying to do is bring in a new wave of engineers who are maybe a little bit out there, maybe a little bit focusing on telling stories, their personal brand, and trying to break that stereotype that engineers are nerds and that, engineering is cool. There's a lot of people out there talking about, games, and there's a lot of stuff online about different software products, and engineering needs to revive itself, because I feel like engineers have got a bad rap over the last 20 or 30 years, and it's not until something that goes wrong that everyone just points at the engineer. And I think engineers need to stand up for themselves and really recreate their persona in the industry and society.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point there, I wanted to draw your attention to a study from South Dakota State University that was published last year. That said that more than 70% of future engineers or engineering students are interested in exploring a career in entrepreneurship and applying their engineering degree in some form or fashion from an entrepreneurial perspective. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on those findings, and why do you think so many young people who enter the engineering field have an eye towards entrepreneurship? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like a gateway. I think a lot of young people now see influencers online making money. They see startup firms, coming up with an idea or a product or a system or some software, and they think, okay, how do I get to the point where I could sell the idea? And obviously engineering is the gateway to that. Without the engineering and the technical components and the understanding of the software or the system or how to build the product or breaking things down into smaller problems to unpack them to resolve or identify what those solutions are, that, in my mind, that is really a gateway into entrepreneurship. And you look at some of the most greatest and famous engineers of the world, and I always talk about Elon Musk. Started very much heavily as an engineer, worked through his way in engineering, then had an idea, sold the idea, and then has continually looked to invent new ideas. And I think that's something that is really powerful in engineering, is that idea of innovation and being able to use design thinking and other tools and systems to come up with the ideas that can change society and could change the outcome of our future. I talk a lot about our future, and I think engineers need to be at the forefront of that, so that it's not just given to a computer model or it's given to an AI chatbot or an agent. I think people and engineers need to be in control of the future and be able to guide the society in a way that's safe and good for the environment and can build the communities around us in a safe way. So for me, engineering is a gateway, and I think that allows people to enter into entrepreneurship, because it's very hard to have one without the other, particularly without having some form of background or knowledge in a system or a procedure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you believe to that point that the best engineers, they don't just design, my friend. You tell me that they have four distinct characteristics. They think, they create, they lead, and they shape the future, as we were just talking about. So tell me why you believe that those four characteristics are vitally important, my friend.
Yeah, so look, there's one thing, that I always sort of landed back on in sort of shaping this vision was that there is a time that you need to think and develop and design, and then there's a moment where you're actually creating something, because that creation is the thing that you are going to then use to shape the future. So it was really trying to break the ideology about what it means to be an entrepreneurial engineer into three very clear steps. You can't get to shaping something without creating it. You can't create something without thinking about it. So I was really just trying to define what that looks like, particularly for my students and mentees that I work with, and the engineers in our company, is really just trying to break it down so that people can have some clear, identifiable steps to be able to get to the point where they can deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. And Darren, I'm also curious to ask you about leadership and its connection to engineering, because our friends at the University of Saskatchewan here in Canada say that they have a tremendous influence on CEOs. I'm talking about, they released a study last year that said that 30% of Canadian CEOs today have an engineering degree, my friend, which of course indicates a strong presence of engineering background and high-level business leadership, my friend. So how do you think engineers make great leaders, and what do you think is the correlation between great leadership and engineering, my friend? What are your thoughts there? And on the findings of this study that 30% of Canadian CEOs have an engineering degree, my friend. What are your thoughts, my friend?
Yeah, look, that's an uncanny statistic, and often as an engineer, I'm looking to see, who are the other leaders, whether or not they're in the government, they're politicians, CEOs, or otherwise, that have an engineering background that we can look to. My take is that a foundation of engineering provides an understanding and a curiosity that allows people to move into management positions, and also engineering allows you to break things down, like programs, like cost, like time, quality aspects. And these things are very important to be able to lead, to understand how much it costs for an employee, to understand, how long a project is going to take, to understand, okay, what's the most important thing for this particular project, or even company's delivery in terms of quality. And those are fundamental basics of being an engineer and also of being a leader. And a lot of those skill sets are in parallel. And I believe that leaders or engineers do make good leaders as long as they can get out of the detail and they can zoom out and see the bigger picture. Then I believe that, yes, engineers probably make some of the best leaders. And I actually think engineers make some of the best project managers, at least in the work that we do in development and infrastructure, because they understand the detail enough to be able to guide a project to avoid, the mistakes and the headaches that others have had before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to ask you about the company you lead in just a second. But I also, full disclosure, Darren, so I was born with what's called spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy. I've lived with cerebral palsy all my life, and I believe that people with disabilities are some of the best engineers and innovators that we have, particularly and making things more efficient, because people with disabilities are natural problem solvers each and every day. And I talk to organizations about the importance of hiring folks with disabilities all the time. So I'm curious about, how do you think people with disabilities, engineering, and efficiency are interconnected, and how you believe, as a leader of an organization yourself, people with disabilities can make the workforce more efficient? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, look, it comes down to solving problems, and whether or not you've got a disability or struggling with your abilities. If you have the ability to solve problems, if you have the ability to talk to people, if you have the ability to flesh out sometimes what someone's saying, I think a lot of the time the emotional intelligence of our engineers is so important, because a lot of the time a client won't tell you their problems. You have to draw it out of them. And I think a lot of that comes down to people's personalities. And I have known many people throughout the years. Of course, there's many engineers that will want to just sit there and they crunch numbers, and they're very good at that. They're very good at crunching their numbers, but they're even better when they can explain why the numbers are how they are. So in my mind, and for us, a range of diverse backgrounds is so important to enable different points of view to come at the same problem, to enable everyone to come together to find a solution. And no one person will always have the right answer every time. So the more diversity and the more people we can bring into engineering to be able to have all those different points of views and different backgrounds and different cultures and different understandings and approaches to solving problems, in my mind, will provide better solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Darren, I know that you're a managing director of Vinculum, where you believe that true engineering excellence is much more than technical skills and expertise, as I mentioned before. It's about building relationships and creating lasting impact, my friend. So tell me about Vinculum and all the great work that you're doing, my friend.
Yeah, so look, Vinculum started from a side hustle, to a very well-rounded consultancy business in water engineering, civil engineering, geotechnical engineering, project management, delivery management. And really for us there's very much a startup culture vibe, and we really press ourselves on challenging ourselves to improve every system and procedure that we have every day. If something's not working, we want to fix it as soon as possible. And in our mind, from idea to execution has to be within the shortest time possible. No matter what it is, we're always pushing to drive change within the organization. The Vinculum it's a technical term. It's actually the line between a denominator and a nominator in a fraction. And it's also a term that's the connective tissue between a muscle and a tendon. And it's also a surveying term, which can connect two parcels of land together under the same title. So for me, the Vinculum is about connecting people. It's about connecting projects, connecting clients to solutions. It's about connecting people together. And we look to find that we're the connective tissue to bring all of those factors together when we're delivering our projects, to look to create value engineering, innovation, and really drive the industry forward in a way where we look to be responsive, we look to drive outcomes. And honestly, it's been a wild ride. It's only 4 years in its infancy, or 3.5 or so. And yeah, it's going from strength to strength. And all I know is that, I'm very passionate about engineering. I'm very passionate about the projects that we have and the people that we work with. And if some of that passion can flow through our culture, that's really, a win for me. That's what success looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And Darren, how do you think engineering and your engineering background has made you a better business networker, my friend? Because, engineering is all about forming new relationships and creating new opportunities. So how do you think your engineering background has made you a better networker in business, my friend?
Yeah, so, it's funny because I like to gamify things. I like to challenge myself. I like to set goals and targets. And I do remember at my first networking event as a very young engineer, I set a goal to try to get 3 business cards. I said I walked into the event, and the game in my mind was, I'm going to get 3 business cards. And I walked up to people, I approached people, and I did get the 3 business cards, which was awesome. And then the other thing I think as an engineer, and it comes back to that curiosity, engineers usually will be better off learning by doing. And I found that if I pushed myself to try networking, if I watched how other people were networking, I watched their body language, I watched their interpersonal skills, I listened to what people said, I also heard that people told me to ask more questions. And as engineers, we have to be asking more questions. It's challenging the status quo, challenging what you did on the last project. Why is this the best solution? And often I tell our young engineers, challenge what we're doing, ask the questions, push and drive the things that we haven't seen yet. You know, you don't know what you don't know. So I felt as a young engineer pushing myself into networking and using some of the, I'll call it skill sets that I created and gamifying the approach enabled me to push myself further into networking. And the other thing too is, you know, I'm very big on following people up. And I do have a course called The Power of the Follow-Up. And I've found that you will be 5x more in front, you know, a partner in a future business endeavor. You have to invest the time, just like your studies in engineering, you have to invest the time to learn the engineering. So for me, there's a few things in there, but I actually believe that it was the engineering mindset that enabled me to network better because I used the tools and systems in parallel to my engineering and applied them to networking.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, Darren, I'm also curious to ask you this two-part question about building on your last answer on how it's important for engineers to constantly be evolving. And I know a lot of what you do is helping people optimize with less, my friend. So how do you think engineers have to constantly evolve and, you know, optimize what they have to do more with less to reduce the cost that they take on, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, you know, engineering has been constantly evolving for the last, you know, 4,000 years. You know, there's obviously a time when everyone used brick and people were designing with brick. And then there was a time when people were using timber. There was a time people were using steel and then concrete. And the evolution in materials has meant that engineers have had to change continually, changing materials, looking at new things. Now, plastic is coming in, 3D printing is coming in, modular design and construction is coming in. Obviously, AI and the digital revolution is changing how we approach, you know, the engineering work that we need to do. Engineers will need to constantly and have constantly evolved over the centuries to find new technology and better ways of doing things. And even to the point where I know that the engineers that are starting engineering studies today or the kids in school that are looking to do STEM, the things that they'll be doing when they're in my time in their career will be inherently completely different to how we do things now. And engineers need to be ready for that and embrace change. And I've actually found that what the engineers need to do is always be looking a better way. You know, we're always looking, like you said, to cut costs, save carbon, save time, provide a better quality, and optimizing for efficiency and looking for more effectiveness within the systems and procedures and I'd say the workflows that we have. You know, in my mind, that is innovation, and that's what engineers stand for.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, Darren, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this fight. The study from a McKinsey and Company that said they did a study on the global impact on engineering, and it found that roughly 40% of you know, the employment worldwide is expected to be exposed to the meaning of AI, whether it to be complemented or help to be replaced, you know, the human aspect of the workforce, my friend. So I'm curious about your thoughts on how AI will affect the future of the global workforce and how engineering can, you know, impact the innovation or how we look at the global workforce. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, so you know, there's a couple of things. There's a few things that come to mind, but you know, I ask people often, okay, so what would you prefer? A driverless vehicle driving you around, or a humanoid robot driving your own car, driving you around? And then you start to break that down further because I'd said, oh, okay, well, we're going to have robots on our construction sites. And, one of my colleagues said, oh, well, we'll manage the robots. And then someone said, well, no, hold on. Then you'll have checking robots and engineering robots and project management robots and plumber robots and electrician robots. And you'll have all these different type of robots that can do all these different things. And then ultimately you just have one robot that could do everything on site, and they'll just figure out what they're doing to go build something. In my mind, the biggest risk with AI and the future in that sense is that everything will be to the letter in accordance with a standard of code. There'll be no room, not a lot of room, at least I believe, for innovation, for breaking the status quo, for doing something differently that's not in accordance with a standard or code, or something where there might be a better way, but it's not obvious to an AI robot or an agentic AI. So I still believe that there's going to be a major role for engineers to shape our future, because ultimately there needs to be a level of design, construction, control. And yes, the innovation that engineers are providing to market will change how engineering professions work. But ultimately, regardless, someone will still need to check, someone will still need to review, someone needs to make sure that this is best for the community, or a human-centered approach in design or innovation. Those things will matter. And I always say people will buy from people. People will sell to people. People want to know that there's someone at the end of the line that can have a conversation with them about, the details, the personality, the functionality. And engineers need to be at the forefront of that, because if we lose touch, and I think if engineers don't, and I believe right now is a very critical point in history for the engineering profession and a lot of professions, if engineers don't come out and own this space, I believe that engineers will get left behind.
Yeah, and to that point, the World Economic Forum projected last year that AI will contribute between I think the number was 15.7 trillion to the global economy by the end of 2030. So I'm wondering your thoughts on how we should interpret that information, and again, the role engineers will play on sort of amplifying the effectiveness of the AI. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, look, there's a view that, in the work that we do, where a report will get drafted by AI and then it will get sent to an authority. Their AI will review the report, and then it will come back. The AI will update the report and it will be approved. I think that is a utopia of thought. But yes, there is some governance that is lacking in the AI space, and ultimately, there needs to be more engineers, politicians, leaders in the industry pushing for that governance, to make sure that we don't go into this rabbit hole where all of a sudden decisions are being made by AGI or a bot or whatever it might be. And if those decisions are wrong, it could have major catastrophic consequences.
Yeah, Darren, just as a citizen and someone that has devoted your life to engineering, I'm curious to ask you, when you look at the world, sort of a discourse today in terms of how we speak to each other and compromise and conversation, I'm wondering your thoughts on how we engineer, for a lack of a better term, a way to heal our societal divisions that tend to, break us apart instead of bringing us together. So when you look at sort of the global view, because I know you're joining me from Sydney, Australia today, I'm curious about when you come down on how we heal our societal divisions from an engineering perspective. My friend, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think unfortunately in our day and age, everyone has their own agenda. And collectively, not just as engineers, but I think a lot of professions need to look to combine together We need more people speaking up at events, online. I talk about it a lot. What will the future look like? And I think there needs to be more conversations, at least where we are around the barbecue on a Sunday afternoon, or at times when, people are talking about it. We need to have more conversations about that, because ultimately, it's those conversations that will bring about change and will unite not just engineers, but other professions, maybe in construction, in other consultancies, because ultimately, there will be change and it is coming. But as long as there's a unified approach, I hope that we can do it together.
Yeah, I've got three questions left for you. And the first of those three questions is this. We talked earlier about the future of AI and how it's going to affect the workforce and its people. And, our friends at Stanford University last year, they did a global survey, rather, back in 2023, and it extended us through the end of last year. And it said that approximately 36% to over 50% of people are worried that AI and technology will replace the human workforce. And I know you told me earlier that you still believe that there's a place for the human workforce. But I'm also curious to ask you, how do you think we can optimize the AI to make the human sort of work experience more efficient? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, so look, everyone has to understand how to use the system. It is a tool. At the moment, obviously, it's a tool. And even if and I know that there are examples where it can think, and it can think for itself. But, look how companies are formed. Companies need direction. Companies need a director. Teams need leaders. And, obviously, if you had a team of AGI or chatbots or even robots, you need to have a leader. And everyone says, oh, well, you get a leader robot. And it's sort of that, that idea that I had before. Ultimately, there needs to be some layer of control. And, whether or not that is, say, some central database or, mission control, I think, you could probably call it something like that. But openly, again, at this time, what we have in front of us is a very powerful tool. And I think everyone needs to understand how to use it. And I think that there'll be jobs created that none of us could have ever even thought of into the future. I don't believe that everyone would just be kicking back on a beach drinking a margarita while, some computer runs the system. There obviously will still need to be people managing those systems. And, if we can optimize ourselves and train ourselves on how to use and create and find better tools, then yeah, sure, there'll be different works that will come out of it and different employment types into the future.
Yeah, and Darren, I'm also curious to ask you from a pop culture and cultural perspective, when you look at the world today, what role do you think engineering and innovation will have when we look at the cultural and pop culture sort of aspect of the world going into the future, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, look, there are now ideas around different, AI programs, learning cultural history, which I think is very important. Not just to document it, but to understand it and to be able to create, whether or not it's imagery or storytelling from those cultures that may or may not have been lost. For the cultures that I'm in, I always look back to, the cassette tape, the CD, VHS, beta, the computers that we had. I remember, when I left university, I had to go buy a 32 meg USB drive that cost me $50 to put my thesis on. And, that was not even 20 years ago, 23, 24 years ago. And, you can only imagine now for the same price, you can get how many gig. You might even be able to get close to a terabyte, even if it was $100 for the same storage device size. So I think looking at culture and how it's played out and how people view the things they have in front of them, more and more, I think cultures will be driven towards, a lot of recording and speaking and video. There'll be memory adaptation where you won't need to remember where to go. You won't need to remember what you did 3 weeks ago, because you can ask your AI pin or the video that you would have taken and live streamed. Our world will be continually formed around data, and data and memories, I believe, will start to merge. And yes, in the future, cultures will revolve around data and not memories, but relationships will still be the one thing that, I don't think anything can take away. Relationships is the one thing that cultures will be built on, and hopefully, forever. But yeah, I do and am concerned about the role of data and the role of electricity. Electricity and data go hand in hand. And, if you're in any position where you have some level of, asset, it will be electricity storage and data storage.
Yeah, and Darren, I'm interested to end on this two-part question. So, just to give you a little context, buddy, I am both a dual Canadian and American citizen. My mom is Canadian, my dad is from America, and I'm curious from an international perspective. When you look at the world and you study both American, Canadian, and international culture from a political or a workplace standpoint or a societal standpoint, but what fascinates you about the rest of the world from that perspective, living in Australia? And then just finally, I'm curious to ask you, when it comes to your own personal and professional legacy, how do you want that to be defined, my friend?
Yeah, look, I hopefully leaving behind a legacy of a engineering firm that breaks the mold and continues to provide solutions for clients. Hopefully to have helped 1,000 young engineers and mentored them and really hopefully build systems and procedures that other people can use and take on their journey and in their careers. Hopefully working towards that goal right now.
Absolutely. And just finally, when you look at the world from a societal perspective, when you study it from Australia, what fascinates you the most about what the world is talking about from a life and a societal perspective, my friend?
Yeah, look, I don't think you can believe everything you see, right? So I think there are worlds in which as again I think relationships come first, and I think probably quite difficult to answer that one.
Yeah, well, life always starts with relationships for sure, my friend. But finally, Darren, tell me if people want to get connected with your engineering firm or yourself personally. What's the best way they can do that, my friend?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, which is just at Darren Flynn. You can look me up, the Entrepreneurial Engineer, or I've got my own website, darrenflynn.com, and yeah, just one word. And yeah, you can join the community there. Love to see you on LinkedIn. I post every day about entrepreneurial engineering, AI, tech, the future. So yeah, it'd be great to connect.
Well, absolutely. Well, my friend, I want to thank you for your dedication and commitment to elevating the field of engineers and providing a pathway for the next generation to be exposed to this vast profession of making a difference. My friend, I want to thank you for your time engaging in conversation with me and your commitment to the industry, my friend. It's most appreciated.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks so much. Really appreciate having a chat with you, mate.